Chapter 1. The Secure Perimeter. The dawn was breaking, but Zev was already moving, quiet as a hunter's shadow. The air tasted of pine and the cold, metallic tang of the Oakhaven border. He pulled his thick, leather jacket tighter against the mist, a habit he'd adopted since leaving the Pact's gilded cage years ago. His boots knew this land, the fringe woods, better than the inside of his own ruined heart. He dropped low, checking a tripwire his team had set. It was subtle, strung with ancient, low-grade silver to disrupt any pack scout trying to cross in wolf form. Not only that, but the silver's weak magic would leave a sting, a marker they couldn't hide. He moved with a hypervigilance born of necessity. Because of that, no one crossed this line without him knowing it. "Quiet morning, Zev," whispered Jax, one of the newer rogues, a skinny guy who had been cast out for refusing to cull a family Ronin deemed weak. Zev didn't look back. Too quiet. Oakhaven's alpha, Ronin, doesn't let things stay quiet. He lets the silence build, Jax. That's how he gets you to drop your guard. Deep down, he knew the truth. Ronin used tradition as a weapon, and right now, the keep was preparing for the mating ceremony. That kind of pomp always meant distraction for the weak and opportunity for the alpha. Zev had no interest in Kaelen, the female Ronin was taking. He only cared about the chaos the ceremony might bring to his border. Instead, his gaze fixed on a cluster of moss near the oldest oak on the line. Wedged into the bark was something foreign, something soft and entirely out of place, a strip of lavender silk, intricately embroidered with the silver sigil of the Oakhaven keep. Moments later, he picked it up. The silk felt expensive, smelling faintly of jasmine and the sickly sweet scent of unearned luxury. That's why he hated the pack. All that wasteful ceremony. All that performance of power. With a single glance, Zev crushed the delicate fabric in his calloused hand, grinding it into the mud with the heel of his boot. "Looks like something for the wedding," Jax murmured, a bitter edge to his voice. "It's trash," Zev stated, his voice flat. He didn't use the word mating rite. Ronin's rituals were merely cages with prettier names. The fact that the pack elite would carelessly discard something so valuable right at his border was an affront. It showed a staggering arrogance, an open loop of contempt that Zev felt obligated to shut. Yet, as he turned away, a flicker of red caught his eye, buried beneath the crushed silk. It was a single, long strand of dark red hair, the color of a setting sun on fresh snow. It wasn't the silk's trash, it was a clue. Who would risk losing something so personal, so close to his camp? He shoved the hair, along with the ribbon, into his pocket, compartmentalizing the potential threat. He wouldn't show the others the small, unsettling detail. They had enough fear to manage. Before he could move, Zev took one last, long inhale of the air, trying to filter the natural sense of the forest from the artificial pride of Oakhaven. His nostrils flared. He had secured the perimeter, but the smell of trouble was lingering, carried on the faintest wisp of the morning breeze. He had to return to camp and prepare for the night, because that was when the pack's darkness truly moved. Chapter 2. The Ghost of the Past. That night, the rogue camp was a comforting circle of firelight and low, practical conversations. The wood smoke, rich, clean, and carrying the earthy scent of their small, communal meal, was a scent of safety. Zev sat slightly outside the main circle, watching. He wasn't eating much. The food tasted bland, and just like that, the memory surfaced, sharp and unwanted. He remembered the smell of cheap, stale liquor and fear. Years ago, under the previous Alpha's regime, Zev had watched an innocent, defenseless Omega female, barely more than a girl, endure a punishment for a minor infraction. It wasn't the mating rite. It was a lesser cruelty, a public shaming that broke her spirit. He had been a low-ranking enforcer then, silent, paralyzed by the law and the Alpha's unchallengeable gaze. He didn't know what scared him more, the Alpha's power or his own failure to intervene. Still, his eyes fixed on Alara, a young rogue with wide, nervous eyes, who was laughing shyly across the fire. She looked so much like that Omega. Zev felt the familiar cold weight settle in his chest, the heaviness that was his guilt personified. I should have acted. I should have snarled. I should have failed trying, instead of succeeding at nothing. His cynicism was a shield, a belief that all systems were corrupt because that justified his solitary existence now. Jax finally broke the strained silence, his voice rough. Alpha Ronan's probably feasting now, celebrating the restoration of balance. Sickening. Zev shrugged. He's just an alpha, Jax. They all wear the same skin, whether they call it tradition or law. We survive by staying out of their light. We survive because we don't buy into their rituals. As the silence stretched, a sound cut through the forest's natural chorus, a long, drawn-out howl that was wrong. It wasn't a wolf cry. It was pitched too high, ending in a chilling, guttural shriek that scraped against the nerve endings. It came from the direction of Oakhaven Keep, far beyond the borderline. Without warning, the comforting scent of wood smoke was violently invaded by something else, an unnatural, metallic reek of ozone, hot iron, burnt shadow, and fresh blood. It was a smell Zev had never encountered, a raw, terrifying olfactory signature of raw, unstable power. The firelight flickered wildly, dancing to the tune of something unseen but undeniably massive that had just been unleashed. Her heart skipped a beat. Zev's internal wolf urged him to investigate. What followed was an immediate, terrifying realization. This was not a pack fight. This was something aberrant. Something inside her shifted. His professional assessment was now laced with primal fear, because this power could destroy everything they had built. He leaped to his feet. Scouts, double the perimeter. No one moves beyond the old granite ridge, Zev commanded, his voice tight. This isn't just noise. It's a wound. He grabbed his heaviest crossbow. He knew the only way to protect his future was to understand the chaos knocking on his door. Chapter 3. Anomaly in the Mist. Come morning, the fringe woods were draped in a dense, cool mist, turning the forest floor into a shifting gray labyrinth. Zev followed the unnaturally strong scent trail alone. The smell of blood and burnt ozone had lessened, replaced by the heavy, suffocating perfume of fear and the subtle, lingering trace of that strange, dark energy. He found the trail near a crumbling deer path, a place no Oakhaven scout would intentionally use. In the span of a breath, Zev was staring at the ground, his hunter's instinct screaming. The earth was violently disturbed, not by a struggle, but by a forced, chaotic passage. The trail was marked by colossal, unidentifiable paw prints, each one the size of a dinner plate, far larger than Alpha Ronan's powerful frame could produce in his wolf form. This was not a normal shifter. This was an aberration, a biological impossibility that defied the known rules of their werewolf world. Maybe it was fate, Zev thought, crouching low. He brushed aside some wet leaves, revealing a dark smear of blood. It wasn't the normal bright crimson of a wound. Instead, it was thick, viscous, and threaded with unsettling, almost black veins, like tar mixed with iron filings. He felt it, clear as day, a latent, powerful energy thrumming in the very soil beneath his hands. Zev's emotional state, immediately alert, suspicion overriding fear. He saw Kaelen's escape not as a political event, but as a dangerous, unstable weapon hurtling toward his camp. He needed to track, contain, and potentially eliminate the threat. On the other hand, he recognized the pain in the trail. This creature, whatever it was suffering. It was running not with malice, but with sheer, desperate instinct. It reminded him of the Omega girl he'd failed. Because of that memory, he pressed on, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't fail to understand this threat, even if he still intended to neutralize it. As the wind shifted, a faint, familiar scent mixed with the darkness, jasmine and expensive silk. The red hair and ribbon. The anomaly was Kaelen. She didn't know what scared her more. The realization that the alpha female had triggered a terrifying secondary form, a shadow wolf of legend, or the certainty that Ronan would send his entire pack to hunt her. This was more than a skirmish. It was a full-scale threat. More importantly, the trail led directly toward the heart of the fringe woods, straight toward the area where Zev had stashed the few emergency supplies he needed for the long winter, the second open loop. This put the aberration on a direct collision course with everything he needed to keep his rogues alive. With every heartbeat, Zev pushed deeper into the mist. He transitioned into his wolf form, a sleek, gray powerhouse, his muscles coiling and releasing with silent efficiency. The raw, beautiful world of the werewolf shifter was a place of heightened senses, and he used them all. He tracked the trail not just by sight, but by the overwhelming scent of trauma and defiance, following the massive, impossible paw prints until he found his target. Without another word, Zev found her. She collapsed in her human form, huddled near a waterfall's base, nearly invisible against the damp rock. Her beautiful wedding silks were shredded, and her skin, Zev's breath caught, was crisscrossed with severe, ritualistic wounds. This was not just banishment. This was a brutal statement. And just like that, everything changed. He hadn't found a monster. He'd found a broken woman who carried the terrifying, impossible shadow of a monster within her. The only question left was what to do with her. Chapter 4. The Unexpected Burden. The air beneath the waterfall was cold, spray misting Zev's face, but the heat radiating off the collapsed woman was unnatural, a volatile fever fueled by magic and trauma. He stood over her, his gray wolf form still bristling with caution. He shifted back, the cold stone of the waterfall chilling his bare skin instantly. He wasn't gentle as he examined her. He gripped her shoulder, turning her slightly. Her human form, Kaelen, was unrecognizable from the glossy images of the Alpha's intended bride. Her face was bloodless, and the fabric of her ceremonial dress was torn into ribbons, stained black where the Shadow Wolf's transformation had scorched it. As the silence roared, Zev focused on the wounds. They were not combat injuries. They were clean, deliberate cuts, spaced precisely across her back and shoulders. They were designed not to kill, but to inflict maximum humiliation and break the will. A flogging rite, he realized, the cold weight settling in his chest instantly, heavier than the guilt he carried for the Omega girl. That past cruelty had been bad, but this was a formal, institutionalized savagery, because that was the depth of Ronan's corruption. Kaelen, he growled, testing the name. She didn't stir. Her breathing was staggered, shallow, and ragged. Yet, beneath the pain and shock, Zev sensed an iron will. He pressed a finger to the side of her neck, confirming her pulse was frantic, but relentlessly fighting. An unbreakable will, he observed, and just like that, the pragmatic decision hit him. He couldn't leave her. Leaving her meant letting Ronan finish the job, and that would validate the tyranny he ran away from. She didn't know what scared her more, the memory of the ritual or the physical presence of Zev, the rogue leader. But Zev saw only a critical dilemma. His survivalist code demanded isolation. His suppressed desire for justice demanded intervention. In that moment, he made the choice. His cynical neutrality was broken. Without thinking, he scooped her into his arms. She was a burden, heavy, broken, and radiating dangerous residual power, but she was his burden now. He knew the only way to protect his future was to confront his past failure through this woman. He began the difficult trek back to the secondary camp, avoiding the main trails. The space between them burned with the residual Shadow Wolf magic and Zev's own conflicted need to protect her. Chapter 5. Interrogation and Defiance. Zev kept Kaelen isolated in a small, concealed cave deep within the heart of the fringe woods. He'd used the last of his sterile wraps to dress her back wounds, wincing at the deep, raised ridges the ceremony had left. He had to know the truth. Not only that, but he needed to confirm she wasn't a spy or a threat that would endanger his people. She woke slowly, groaning. Her golden eyes, fierce even through the pain, flew open, locking instantly onto Zev. He stood across the cave entrance, his arms crossed, a study in cynical granite. "Who are you?" Kaelen's voice was a dry, raspy whisper.
"I'm Zev.
"The man who didn't leave you for the vultures." He kept his own voice low, authoritative, careful not to betray any warmth. "You crashed into my territory, Alpha Kaelen. So tell me this, are you a spy, or an unstable weapon Ronan released?" Kaelen's emotional state, injured, defiant, refusing to plead. She wouldn't submit. Her thoughts spun. She analyzed Zev, the rogue's quiet competence, the hard lines of his face, and knew he wasn't Ronan. "I was betrayed," she finally managed, forcing the words out. "The mating rite, it was a trap. Ronan resurrected the oath of submission, a flogging rite. He wanted to break me. I refused." Zev narrowed his eyes. "Refused? And the thing that erupted from you? The Shadow Wolf, a legend. What was that?" "A new trick of the Elders." Kaelen tried to shift, a wave of pain washing over her. She gritted her teeth, desperation fueling her. Her body moved on instinct, her spine arching, muscles contracting. The dark energy surged, but it was raw, uncontrolled. It dissipated in a sharp, blinding flash that left the air tasting of sulfur and ozone, leaving her exhausted and shuddering. What followed was a silence punctuated only by her gasping breaths. Zev watched the terrifying display. He recognized the depth of the betrayal. The rite was far worse than the lesser cruelties he'd witnessed years ago. As the truth unraveled, he saw the genuine fury in her eyes, a defiance that echoed his own suppressed desire for justice. "It's not a trick," Kaelen choked out. "It's what happens when a spirit breaks and refuses to stay broken." Zev stayed, skeptical, but deeply intrigued. This defiance was the only thing separating her from the victim he failed to save. Meanwhile, Zev had already sent Jax on a clandestine mission. He needed confirmation from outside the Fringe Woods. He needed to stabilize Kaelen, not just her body, but the volatile magic coursing through her. Because of that, he decided. He wouldn't kill her. Not yet. He rose, moving to the cave entrance. "Rest. If Ronan finds you here, he won't be gentle. We wait for word from the keep." He had to know the full stakes before committing his rogues to war. Chapter 6. The Keep's Decree. A beat later, Jax returned, scrambling down the rocks into the concealed cave complex. His scent was rank with fear and the dust of a hard run. He didn't have to speak for Zev to know the news was bad. "It's worse than we thought, Zev," Jax gasped, clutching his side. He delivered the horrifying details: the Grand Hall destroyed, Alpha Ronan wounded but alive, and the Elders publicly declaring Kaelen an abomination, the winged scourge. They said anyone sheltering her is committing high treason against the pact and will be executed without trial. Jax shivered violently. It's Ronan's official decree. He painted her as a demon. Kaelen, weak but alert, heard every word. Her immediate new goal was simply to survive long enough to understand her own trauma and volatile power. She felt it, clear as day, the immense, isolating weight of being deemed a monster. Zev's new immediate goal: secure the camp and prepare for war. He now knew that keeping her was a definitive act of rebellion. He's using the ancient laws of banishment against her, Zev mused aloud, pacing the small space. Not only that, but Ronan was clearly terrified of the Shadow Wolf and was moving fast to control the narrative. This wasn't just Kaelen's fight anymore. Ronan had just made it Zev's. This is the point of no return, Zev thought, the final nail in the coffin of his cynical isolation. He had built this camp to survive outside the system. Now, because of this one woman, the system was crashing into his front door. As if fate demanded it, Zev stopped pacing and looked directly at Kaelen. Her eyes, still filled with pain, were now burning with cold resolution. The terror was gone, replaced by a deep, fierce clarity. "I can't guarantee your safety," Zev stated, his voice low and serious. "I can't guarantee my people's safety. But I can guarantee you'll be hunted until you drop, or until Ronan catches you." "Then don't guarantee," Kaelen rasped. "Give me a purpose." Zev met her gaze, a profound shift occurring between them. He wasn't just seeing a victim or a burden anymore. He saw a weapon of justice forged in fire and betrayal. Before the words left her lips, Zev offered the alliance he never thought he'd make. I can teach you how to survive this. How to control that. He gestured vaguely toward the residual darkness clinging to her skin. I offer you refuge and training. In return, you offer your defiance and your truth. Your proof of the rot in Oakhaven. We fight on my terms, with my rules. No more silks. No more ceremonies. Kaelen nodded, a sharp, single movement of acceptance. And she let it happen, the silent, desperate pact sealing their alliance. Zev had finally chosen a side, locking himself and his rogue pack into a deadly, high-stakes conflict with the strongest alpha in the region. The war for the soul of the pack had officially begun. Chapter 7. The First Lesson. The alliance was sealed, not with a ceremonial bond, but with a hard, shared stare in the damp, lonely darkness of the cave. As the bond pulsed between them, a nascent flicker of mutual necessity, Zev knew he had to move fast. Kaelen was a ticking time bomb, the volatile magic of the shadow wolf a hurricane barely contained beneath her skin. He didn't waste time on empathy. He dragged Kaelen deep into the fringe woods, far from the secondary camp. The air here was thicker, the trees taller, creating an atmosphere that felt both ancient and suffocating. In the quiet that followed their intense journey, Zev set up the lesson. Forget the pack training, Zev instructed, his voice echoing low among the moss-covered granite formations. Your alpha training taught you control through suppression. That's what Ronan wanted, a neat, controlled shifter. That's why the rage broke you. Now we use the rage. We use the pain. Kaelen, exhausted, bandaged, yet fueled by a desperate need to reclaim power, looked confused. Her thoughts spun. She was a pack warrior. Strength came from order. I don't understand. The shadow wolf is a curse. It's too much power. I need to push it down. Pushing it down is what nearly killed you, Zev countered, his voice sharp, because true power comes from truth, not denial. That thing isn't a curse. It's the physical manifestation of your unbreakable defiance. Every stripe on your back, every ounce of betrayal, that's the fuel. You want control? Then embrace the burn. Force the shift. Zev's emotional state, analytical and critical. He watched her like a scientist observing a dangerous reaction. He saw the potential power, but the emotional volatility, the raw, unbridled fury, made him fear the risk. Kaelen tried, focusing, trying to find the familiar rhythm of transformation. But all she found was the searing memory of the flogging rite. No matter how hard she tried, the change wouldn't come. She trembled, tears of frustration, not pain, welling in her eyes. You're fighting it, Zev snapped, stepping closer, his presence a challenge. He didn't use flowery language, he used pressure. You want vengeance? You want justice? Then stop thinking like a trapped pack female. Stop pleading. You were betrayed by everyone you trusted. Let that hatred become your skin. He pushed her physically, forcing her off balance. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, Kaelen roared, a sound torn from her very core. It wasn't a wolf howl. It was primal, painful, and terrifyingly dark. Without warning, the shadow wolf erupted. It wasn't the slow, elegant shift of a normal alpha. It was instantaneous, violent. A monstrous, winged silhouette of midnight and muscle, leather wings unfurling with a sound like tearing fabric. The air thickened with dark magic. Before she could move, Kaelen lost all control. A concentrated burst of black, residual energy, pure, chaotic fury, shot out, vaporizing a thicket of brush and scarring the granite wall. Just like that, the shadow wolf dissolved, leaving Kaelen collapsed, gasping, her human body shimmering with cold sweat. Zev stood frozen, the shock palpable. He had seen raw power, but never this destructive potential. His survival and logistics mastery was now faced with an equation that had no solution. He had survived the cruelty of the pack, but could he survive the power of a scourge? Control, Zev breathed, his voice rough with awe and fear. This mentorship was the initial step toward Zev trusting something beyond his core group, but it was terrifying. That wasn't control. That was a tantrum. Next time, you hold the lightning. Chapter 8. The Supply Run Test. After that, Zev pulled Kaelen away from training the Shadow Wolf, focusing instead on the practical reality of the Fringe Woods. He needed to assess her mindset. More importantly, he needed to confirm if the pack confidence was truly gone. He organized a small, essential supply run, needing to retrieve traps and a cache of medicinal herbs from a remote location. The team was Jax, Alara, the young rogue Zev felt responsible for, and Kaelen. "We move slow," Zev commanded, his voice a low thrum that blended with the forest sounds.
"No scent. No snap branches."
"We are ghosts." Kaelen, in her sleek, ordinary brown wolf form, tried to comply. She felt it, clear as day, the immense difference between pack life and rogue survival. In Oakhaven, strength meant intimidation and scent marking. Here, strength meant invisibility. Even so, she struggled, moving with a noticeable, heavy confidence. She was used to being seen. Zev stayed, disappointed. He constantly had to tug Kaelen back, correcting her reckless pace and her failure to track subtle shifts in the wind. Truth be told, she was carrying the pack's overconfidence like a lead weight, and it was going to get them killed. "You're moving like you expect the trail to bow to you," Zev finally challenged, halting the group near a thick stand of ferns. "We are the hunted, not the hunters, Kaelen. We survive because we respect the ground, and because we understand every sound is a potential knife." "We could move faster in human form," Kaelen argued, frustration boiling over. She still thought of stealth as a phase, not a way of life. Zev stared at her, his expression hardening. Human form leaves a human scent. Pack shifters are arrogant. Rogues are practical. Which one are you? He forced her to shed her belief in pack privilege. As her wolf stirred, Kaelen's defiance flashed. She realized Zev wasn't just teaching her to survive, he was teaching her to be a rogue. She took a deep breath, focusing on the scent of Jax's anxiety, the slight, nervous tremor in Alara's gait, and the scent of the nearby, stagnant water. The only question left was what she truly valued, the pride of her former title or the practical necessity of survival. Before the words left her lips, she dropped her pace, her movements becoming quieter, more deliberate. Zev gave an almost imperceptible nod, a rare acknowledgement. They completed the run successfully. By the time they returned to the hidden camp, the tension had eased. But victory was short-lived. Zev spotted it immediately. Near their secondary perimeter, carved into the rough bark of an old pine, was a precise, freshly carved pack sign, a subtle marker that could only be left by an Oakhaven scout. This warning sign, a clear open loop, showed Ronan wasn't just issuing decrees, he was systematically tracking Kaelen into the heart of the woods. Zev's successful stealth run only confirmed they were already compromised. Chapter 9. The Border Skirmish. As a result of the scout mark, Zev knew Ronan was tightening the net. He had to show Kaelen what a real fight was, a fight for survival, not honor. Zev led a small team to a known patrol route just inside the Fringe Woods. He set a simple, brilliant trap based on misdirection and sound, planning to ambush the pack patrol. Zev stayed, calmly assessing. He moved with a focused, almost detached efficiency. His plan was tight. There was no room for Kaelen's volatile fury. "You use your basic wolf form," Zev instructed Kaelen, his eyes hard.
"No sado."
"I want quick thinking. No brute force. Show me you learned something other than how to preen in a grand hall." Kaelen's emotional state, furious at Zev for limiting her. She knew the Shadow Wolf could end the fight in seconds. Her immediate goal was to eliminate the threat quickly. With every heartbeat, she felt the immense power bubbling, restrained by Zev's cynical command. The confrontation began. The Oakhaven patrol, 4 strong, arrogant shifters, walked right into Zev's snare, splitting their formation. Meanwhile, Zev and Jax struck, neutralizing 2 instantly through practiced guerrilla tactics, a slash, a choke, and silence. Kaelen engaged the 3rd. She fought well, but traditionally. She relied on strength and intimidation. The pack shifter was fast and the fight dragged. Her wolf pressed forward, desperate to shift, to unleash the ultimate power she held. "Hold," Zev barked, his voice splitting the air. He was already subduing the fourth scout, but he held his position, intentionally letting Kaelen struggle. Because he needed her to learn that true power requires strategy. Zev denied her the power. Kaelen finally broke the deadlock, using a maneuver Zev had taught her, a low roll and an attack on the shifter's weakest joint, ending the fight with a painful, non-lethal submission. Her breath caught as she looked at Zev, fury mixing with a grudging respect. "We could have used the scourge. It would have been faster." "Faster isn't smarter, Kaelen," Zev replied, his voice low and unwavering. "Faster is messy. Faster draws Ronan's entire army. We fight smart. We save the lightning for the storm. You still rely on instinct. I need a weapon that can calculate." First significant test. Zev had won without major casualties, proving his methods worked. But Kaelen's raw potential was defined as a weapon she had yet to master. As the echo faded, Zev stripped the scouts' bodies. He found the usual pack weapons, but then, hidden beneath the lining of one scout's tunic, he found small, intricately carved tracking charms. They were enchanted to emit a faint signal only alpha-level magic could detect. Zev stared at the artifacts. Ronan wasn't hunting Kaelen randomly with patrols. He was hunting her methodically, with specialized tools. This was an organized war, and it meant the pressure was rising faster than Zev had predicted. They needed more than survival. They needed a strategy to fight the system itself. Chapter 10. The Intercepted Intel. The discovery of the tracking charms had changed everything. Which meant Ronan wasn't just reacting to Kaelen's defiance, he was using advanced strategy to flush them out. Zev knew they had to hit back, not with a skirmish, but with intelligence. Zev planned the intercept of a key messenger, forcing them to penetrate deeper into Oakhaven land than any rogue dared. The tension was a living thing, taut wire between the dense trees. Zev moved focused only on tactical success. Kaelen, beside him in her basic wolf form, moved with a dangerous, barely contained fury. Her world tilted. She was so close to the keep, so close to Ronan. Her goal was to turn the intel into an immediate counterattack. "Stay focused, Kaelen," Zev hissed low. The air thickened around them with the scent of pine and the metallic tang of fear. "Your rage is a liability here. We take the scroll, and we run. No casualties if we can avoid it." "He deserves to burn for what he did," Kaelen retorted, her voice a low growl even in wolf form. "He fabricated the right," Zev stated, anxious, seeing the risk outweigh the reward. He risked his life, and the lives of his small team, because Kaelen's thirst for action was a constant, unpredictable variable. On the other hand, he had to admit her fury was a powerful magnet, drawing in the rogues who craved true justice. They found the messenger, a nervous, mid-level pack officer, near a secluded spring, exchanging a heavy leather-bound text with a waiting guard. Before either could speak, Zev and his rogue, Jax, moved like ghosts, neutralizing the guard instantly and pinning the messenger before he could howl. Zev looked at Kaelen, waiting. She had the chance to let the shadow wolf loose, to tear the messenger apart in a spectacular display of vengeance. Instead, she settled. She used her mouth to muzzle the man, applying pressure until he went limp, not dead. Zev's chest ached with relief and surprise. She had listened. She had chosen control over chaos. They retrieved the heavy leather-bound text from the messenger's bag. It felt ancient, heavy with age. What followed was a frantic retreat, disappearing back into the safety of the fringe woods. Once they were back in the cave, Zev confronted her, not about the fight, but about the risk. "Your defiance is just revenge, Kaelen. Ronan is counting on you being reckless."
Kaelen stod hasht spun.
She had proven control, but Zev still saw her as a tool of vengeance. With a single glance, she pointed to the scroll in her hands. "Revenge is instinct. This is the truth." Chapter 11. The Corrupted Text. After that, Kaelen pored over the leather text. She compared the ancient script, detailing the true rites of alpha succession, to her own detailed, agonizing memories of the Mating Rite ceremony Ronan had forced upon her. Zev watched her from a distance, the firelight casting dancing shadows on her face. Her eyes blazed, not with shadow wolf rage, but with cold, intellectual fury. In the quiet that followed, she slammed the text flat on the damp stone floor. "It wasn't just a brutal rite, Zev," she whispered, her voice dangerously quiet. "It was fabricated. All of it." She pointed to a passage detailing the oath of submission. The ritual Ronan claimed was ancient law, the one that necessitated the flogging. She didn't know what scared her more, the physical pain she endured, or the realization of the massive, calculated lie Ronan had built his power on. Ronan didn't revive an old law. He invented it, Kaelen explained, tracing a line of script that detailed the true, consensual right of union between equals. He mixed old legends with total fiction to justify cruelty and consolidate power. "Look at the seals. He forged them." Zev state, shock and vindication. He felt a powerful, almost overwhelming rush of "I knew it." His long-held cynicism, the belief that all pacts were corrupt systems, was validated. But then, the truth hit him. This wasn't just gossip. This was legal proof that Ronan was a fraud. This was the midpoint revelation. "This is not a political tool, Kaelen," Zev muttered, his mind already spinning tactical possibilities. "This is evidence. This is the truth that will fracture the pack." Kaelen's goal instantly transformed from survival to justice. Her misbelief that the pack system was flawed but fixable was shattered. She looked at Zev, the shift complete. The moment their eyes locked, Kaelen's expression became cold and utterly resolute. "We don't hide anymore," she said, her voice clear and strong, filled with a newfound, terrifying conviction. "We expose him. We take this text, and we break him where he stands, in front of the pack, in front of the elders. We fight for the soul of Oakhaven." Chapter 12. Zev's fear confirmed. As the bond pulsed with the urgency of Kaelen's new purpose, Zev began planning the full offensive. Their camp shifted from a refuge to a military base. Kaelen, fueled by righteousness, was magnetic. He watched Kaelen rally the rogues. She spoke about justice, about truth, about reclaiming their pack. The rogues, disenfranchised, broken individuals, were drawn to her charisma and righteous anger like iron to a magnet. They saw a queen of justice. Zev state, conflict and internal resistance. He supported the goal, but then the fear surged. He saw the historical cycle, idealistic leaders, charismatic speakers, becoming tyrants. He remembered how easily the previous alpha had swayed the enforcers, including himself, into supporting cruelty. "She is so powerful, so beautiful, so certain." She didn't know what scared her more, Ronan's external cruelty or the internal power Kaelen wielded so easily. Maybe it was fate that he, the most cynical rogue, had allied himself with the most idealistic alpha. "She's good, Zev," Jax commented, watching Kaelen outline a basic defense strategy. "She gives them hope." "Hope is cheap," Zev retorted, his voice tight. "It's the currency of alphas. It's what gets people killed when the hope fails." His fear was confirmed because Kaelen was charismatic, and charismatic leaders often demanded unquestioning loyalty. With every step he took, Zev recognized that Kaelen was different. She had suffered the system's cruelty and knew its cost. But then, his cynicism roared back. He had to be the safeguard. He had to be the cold anchor to her righteous fire. Zev walks away from the planning fire, heading into the woods to sit alone, making a private promise. "I will help her win. I will help her expose Ronan. But if Kaelen ever turns tyrant, if she ever uses that shadow wolf power to inflict the slightest cruelty on the innocent, I will be the one to stop her." As the sky darkened, Zev returned to the cave entrance. Kaelen was waiting, the ancient text clutched in her hands, her eyes burning with determination. The stage was set, and Zev knew their next move would unleash Ronan's full wrath. Chapter 13. The Pact of War. The dawn after the midpoint revelation was cold, but the rogue camp hummed with purpose. As the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of snow and distant fear, Zev called an assembly. This was the moment of total commitment, the end of isolation. He stood before his rogues, 20 hardened, cynical survivors, with Kaelen by his side. He didn't use flowery words. He used facts and proof. For years, we survived by hiding from Oakhaven's rot, Zev began, his voice low but carrying absolute authority. We built our strength on neutrality. That neutrality is now a liability. Ronan has found us. He is hunting us with specialized tracking charms. He didn't use soft language. He used stark reality. Not only that, but Zev produced the heavy, leather-bound ancient text. He unrolled the corrupted sections Kaelen had marked, displaying the falsified seals for all to see. Ronan is not an alpha by law. He is a dictator by lie. He fabricated the oath of submission. He is a fraud, and Kaelen is the living proof of his fraud. What followed was a low, angry murmur that swept through the gathered rogues. Their initial cynicism was broken by tangible, legal evidence of Ronan's deception. Zev continued, pointing to Kaelen. She is the truth. She will reclaim the pact and restore the true right of union, a pact built on equality and strength, not lies and submission. I commit the protection of this camp, our resources, and our fighting power to her mission. He held up a simple, sturdy blade, forged from scavenged iron. The ceremonial rogue blade, simple and practical, free of pack ornamentation. With every heartbeat, he transferred his life's work, his people, to her command. In return, Zev stated, looking out over the faces of his people, we fight for the future, for our safety, for land rights and true freedom when the war is won. This is our pact. Before the words left her lips, Kaelen stepped forward, her regal bearing returning, tempered by the grit of the fringe woods. She took the rogue blade from Zev's hand, her grip steady. She didn't thank him. She met his eyes, a silent promise passing between them, one of mutual respect and shared, deadly intent. She didn't know what scared her more, the weight of Zev's commitment, or the exhilaration of finally fighting for a purpose greater than herself. Just like that, the alliance was formalized. That's why they moved. Kaelen, taking Jax and a few others, executed the high-risk provocation, a raid on a distant supply depot deep in pact territory. Zev stayed behind, a knot of dread in his stomach, watching the resulting column of smoke plume, black and unmistakable, rise against the eastern sky. He had broken his isolation and risked everything he built. Chapter 14. The Hostage Crisis. A beat later, Ronan reacted exactly as Zev knew he would, with brutal, personal retaliation. Ronan didn't chase the shadow wolf, he targeted Zev. Zev received the frantic report from a young runner. Oakhaven guards had raided a small, isolated farm on the outskirts of the fringe, the home of Alina and Tomas. Tomas, a gentle, older man, had often left food for Zev's runners in secret, a tiny, precious network of human kindness that Zev had guarded fiercely. Zev and Kaelen raced to the farm, shifting into their fastest wolf forms. As the bond pulsed with urgency, Zev's internal control broke. The attack had targeted his personal network of help, the small corner of the world where he still allowed trust. His state was pure, cold fury. When her name left his lips, Tomas's name, it was a barely audible snarl. They arrived too late. The small, wooden farmhouse was shattered. Instead of finding Tomas, they found Alina weeping, huddled beside an overturned water trough, her scent sharp with terror. They took him, she choked out. The Alpha's guards. They said the rogue leader and the winged beast must surrender, or he pays the price. Zev's chest ached. The consequences of his commitment were immediate and catastrophic. This wasn't just a loss of an ally. The captured ally was a symbol of Zev's past failure to protect the weak. That's why he felt the guilt so keenly. This was the Omega girl, all over again. Kaelen's state, fiercely driven by guilt and defiance. Her immediate goal was now the rescue of the hostage. She saw the terror in Alina's eyes, and that terror became her own fuel. Without thinking, Zev found a small, discarded, metallic device near the porch, a crude but effective broadcast unit left by Ronan's guards. Suddenly, the silence was broken by Ronan's voice, booming over the forest, amplified by pack magic. To the Abomination, Kaelen, and the rogue traitor, Zev, you have until midnight. Surrender the Shadow Wolf, or the traitor's friend will meet the dawn at the execution post. Justice will be served. Ronan had made the war deeply personal. Zev closed his eyes, his fists clenching until his knuckles were white. The time for calculation was over. The time for impulse had begun. Chapter 15. The Desperate Plan. After that chilling ultimatum, strategy was secondary to urgency. Zev and Kaelen immediately retreated to the cave complex, adrenaline and dread mixing in the stagnant air. We go tonight, Kaelen stated, her voice tight, already mapping out the known guard placements. They won't expect a move right away. I go in as the Shadow Wolf. I create the diversion. You take Tomas and get out. Zev state, calculating, prioritizing the immediate rescue over the long-term war, but filled with dread that this impulse will lead to disaster. He knew this was reckless, driven by raw emotion and guilt. He knew the only way to protect his future was to confront the present danger head-on.
No, Zev counters sharply.
We don't go in with brute force. Ronan will be waiting for the Shadow Wolf. He wants you exposed. You go in as Kaelen.
Quiet.
I lead the approach. I know the blind spots. With every heartbeat, the plan took shape, cobbled together from Zev's intimate knowledge of Oakhaven's flaws and Kaelen's ability to move silently when focused. It involved using the old, forgotten servant tunnels near the keep's perimeter, a high-risk ingress that Zev hadn't used in years. More importantly, Zev looked at Jax, Alara, and the two other rogues he was committing to this mission. He knew they were placing their trust, their very lives, in his hands. Because of that, he owed them honesty. If we fail, we are committing suicide for human, Zev stated, his voice devoid of emotion. If you stay, I understand. Your survival is your own. Without another word, Jax and Alara stepped forward, their eyes resolute. They weren't fighting for Tomas. They were fighting for the chance to prove their rogue existence meant something. Zev looked at Kaelen. Her eyes were not pleading, but firm. She trusted his tactics. Zev gives a heavy, silent nod to his small team. The plan was set. They were abandoning caution, sacrificing safety for a principle. The finality of the decision hung in the air. Before she could move, Zev turned, leading them out of the cave. They shifted into their basic wolf forms, disappearing into the dense forest, shadows racing against the impending dawn. The stage was set for a guaranteed failure that would test their new bond to its absolute breaking point. Chapter 16. The Failed Ambush. They moved like quicksilvers through the pre-dawn shadows, Zev leading the charge toward the outer wall of Oakhaven Keep. As the wind shifted, carrying the stench of a nearby city mixed with the familiar, artificial pride of the Alpha's territory, Zev felt the metallic taste of dread rising in his throat. Zev located the opening to the old servant tunnel, a dark, narrow fissure hidden by overgrown ivy. It was exactly where he remembered it. Too easy, his internal cynic whispered. But then, the necessity of saving Tomas drowned out the warning. He sent Jax and Alara through first. Kaelen followed, silent, her movements fueled by desperate resolve.
Zev went last.
What followed was the sickening, inevitable trap. They emerged into a small, enclosed courtyard, not the outer path Zev expected. The tunnels were altered. Without warning, the air was ripped apart by the sound of metal clicking and the blinding glare of torches. Welcome, traitors. Ronan's voice boomed from the balcony above, amplified by magic, thick with smug victory. Did you really think I wouldn't secure my own borders after you, Zev, betrayed every law of the pack? Zev state, crushed. He saw his greatest fear realized. Ronan had anticipated his move. He had led his people and Tomas straight into a trap. Chaos erupted. Specialized guards, trained to contain shifter abilities, poured from the surrounding doorways. Kaelen roared, the sound transitioning instantly into the primal shriek of the shadow wolf. The air thickened with dark magic and desperate rage. She was a spectacular, winged silhouette of midnight fury, fighting with lethal, overwhelming force, trying to carve a path to the execution post visible at the edge of the courtyard. Meanwhile, the battle raged, but the guards weren't trying to capture her. They were stalling. Zev's belief in the possibility of justice was shattered. He saw Tomas, bound and gagged at the post, his eyes wide with fear, and then the blur of the executioner's sword. The sound of the blade finding its mark was sickening, final. "Run!" Zev roared, his voice hoarse, dragging the wounded Jax away from the blast zone. He saw his own reflection in the blood. His action led to the death of an innocent, just like his inaction had done in the past. Ronan seemed triumphant, and the Rogue Alliance suffered demoralizing, heavy losses. In the span of a breath, Zev tackled Kaelen, forcing her out of her shift with a brutal, sharp blow to her temple, the only way to sever the volatile connection. He slung her unconscious, shaking body over his shoulder. He fought his way back through the servant tunnel, shielding her from the pursuing guards while enduring injuries that tore at his shoulder and leg. He knew the only way to protect his future was to escape with the living. Chapter 17. Retreat and Scrutiny. After that spectacular failure, the fragmented Rogue Alliance limped back to a secondary, heavily concealed camp deeper in the woods. They suffered heavy losses, 2 rogues gone, Jax badly wounded, and Alara shaken into silence. Zev faced open scrutiny. His remaining shifters, exhausted and demoralized, gathered around a pitiful fire. The doubt was thick, hanging in the smoky air. "You said we fight smart, Zev," growled a rogue named Finn, his voice sharp with betrayal. "You said strategy. You risked everything for a human we couldn't save. This was a pack fight, and you dragged us into it." Zev's goal: maintain leadership legitimacy and absorb the blame. "I take the blame," Zev said flatly, his voice raw. He didn't offer excuses. He didn't use flowery language. He used stark accountability. "It was my trap. My mistake. Ronan knew our weakness. He knew my past failures." Because of that loss, Zev was now at his lowest point. He had abandoned his survivalist code for a cause that failed dramatically, sacrificing the security he had worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, Alara, who had always looked to Zev for quiet strength, refused to meet his eyes. She felt it, clear as day, the immense, terrifying weight of their losses. The failure was palpable, poisoning the air. Zev's internal flaw was confirmed. He could not be a hero. He was only a catalyst for destruction. That night, Zev finally made his way to the deepest part of the woods, where Kaelen had retreated. She was curled up alone in the dark, barely registering his presence. She hadn't shifted since he knocked her out, her raw power dormant, replaced by the profound stillness of despair. The space between them burned not with passion, but with shared, devastating failure. Chapter 18. Dark Night of the Soul / Zev's Confession. Zev sits with Kaelen in the deepest part of the woods. He didn't offer hope. Hope was what Ronan sold to the weak. He offered the truth. "Tomas's death is on me," Zev began, his voice barely a rasp. He ran a scarred hand over the rough bark of a pine. As the silence stretched, he spoke not as a leader, but as a wounded man. "Years ago, before I left Oakhaven, I was an enforcer." He spoke of the Omega girl he'd failed, the lesser cruelty, the humiliation she endured. She was broken because the system demanded submission. I stood by. I watched. I did nothing because I feared the Alpha more than I hated the cruelty. I convinced myself that surviving was the only honorable act left. With every heartbeat, he exposed his deepest failure. When I ran, I built this camp to prove I was right. That separation was salvation. That inaction saved lives. But I was wrong. He looked at Kaelen, her face illuminated by the faint light of the moon. I risked everything for Tomas not because I was a hero, but because I was trying to silence the scream of that girl I let down. And I failed again. I failed spectacularly.
Kaelen stojahash spun.
Zev was not just a cynical protector. He was a silent witness who broke under the weight of his own morality. Because of that shared vulnerability, Kaelen finally found the strength to speak, her voice trembling but gaining resolve. I failed because I was reckless, she admitted, her shame palpable. I relied on the Shadow Wolf's fury. I went in to tear him apart, not to save Tomas. I let Ronan use my rage against me. In the echo of his voice, Zev leaned in. But you fought, Kaelen. You did not submit. The girl I knew, she never fought. You have fire. Don't let failure extinguish it. Let it forge you. Crucible moment. Zev provided the internal turning point for Kaelen, completing his own internal arc from silent witness to active participant. He had confessed his weakness, transforming their relationship from mentor/weapon to allies forged in shared, devastating honesty. Kaelen finally looks at him, a flicker of light in her eyes. Her fury hasn't died, but hardened into resolve. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, quiet determination. The lowest point was over, and the time for vengeance, calculated, precise vengeance, was about to begin. Chapter 19. Forging the Weapon. After that devastating loss, the air in the deep woods was no longer heavy with despair, but with the cold, dense silence of absolute resolve. The wind shifted, and Kaelen emerged from her seclusion, the scars on her back a stark, vivid testament to the cost of her conviction. He watched her practice the shift. No longer was the Shadow Wolf an explosion of trauma. It was a controlled burst of energy, a silent, black wave of power that obeyed her will. She practiced transforming not out of rage, but out of necessity, holding the monstrous form for long, steady moments before snapping back to human form, breathing hard but composed. She had found the anchor in her own defiance. Zev's state, respectful admiration. He saw the true warrior she had become, validating his choice to ally with her. He now trusted her judgment completely. He no longer saw the volatile weapon he feared, but the unstoppable force of justice. Kaelen's new resolve solidified her transformation. Zev shifted from mentor to equal strategic partner. With every heartbeat, he knew this was the one he had waited for, the leader who would never become the tyrant. The finality of the decision hung in the air. Kaelen walked toward Zev, the ancient, corrupted text in her hands. She opened it to the pages detailing Ronan's lies. Tomas's death was Ronan's mistake, Kaelen stated, her voice quiet and firm. He thought it would break us. It only sharpened the blade. She handed the uncorrupted ritual text to Zev. This is the true weapon.
We use it at the moon gathering.
In front of the entire pack. Chapter 20. The final strategy session. A beat later, the cave became their war room. Zev and Kaelen hunched over a crude map etched in the dirt, a synthesis of Kaelen's ideological courage and Zev's grounded realism. Kaelen is focused, driven, and calculating. Her goal is not to murder Ronan, but to expose him legally and morally to the pack. The moon gathering is the only time the conservative elders are forced to appear publicly, Kaelen explained, tracing a line on the dirt map. They can't be assassinated. They have to be legally and morally broken. Zev stayed, focused, accepting the inevitable risk. He detailed the escape routes and contingencies, old ventilation shafts, forgotten drain tunnels. He knew the only way to protect his future was to confront his past failure, through precise planning. Not only that, but Zev insisted on finding internal allies. He utilized his old contacts, disillusioned mid-level guards and minor pack leaders who privately despised Ronan's brutality. They recruited 3 crucial defectors, witnesses who would corroborate the forgery. Ronan will try to silence you immediately, Zev warned, his finger tapping the spot marked Grand Hall. When the scrolls are presented, the chaos will be instant. I will be your shield, Kaelen. I will protect your flank, but the Shadow Wolf stays leashed until the moment you need to subdue him. The pack must see the evidence first. Zev watches Kaelen speak to the internal sympathizers, seeing her rally their courage with quiet confidence. Just like that, he realized she had already won the moral war. making him ready for the physical one. This final plan was the culmination of his life as a rogue. Every lesson of caution, every hidden tunnel, every suppressed memory of fear, now committed to a single, explosive act of justice. Chapter 21. The Silent March. After that, there was only the cold stillness of the final approach. Hours before the moon gathering, Zev led the silent procession. His few remaining rogues, the 3 defectors, and Kaelen. Kaelen is resolute, leading from the front with absolute confidence. She was dressed in simple leather, the ancient text rolled and secured at her hip. They moved through the same servant tunnels where Tomas died, but this time, Zev led them away from the courtyard trap, deep toward a forgotten drainage entrance near the grand hall kitchens. The stale, echoing air of the keep was a stark contrast to the fresh, wild scent of the fringe woods. Zev's state. High anticipation and resolve. He made a final check of his ceremonial rogue blade, the weight familiar and comforting. He was no longer running. He was coming home to tear down the house he had run from. This was the redemption he had sought for years. The tension is maximized as they hear the muffled roar of the crowd assembling in the grand hall above. Zev's chest ached with the intensity of the moment. He looked at Kaelen. She gave him a small, fierce nod. He took a deep breath of the stale keep air, gripped his ceremonial rogue blade, and gave Kaelen the signal. The waiting was over. Kaelen shifted instantly, not into the shadow wolf, but into her standard, majestic golden alpha form, the visual proof of her rightful claim. Zev threw open the hidden door. Chapter 22. The Climax, the Trial in the Hall. Without warning, the grand hall descended into chaos. The moon gathering was in full swing, the pack assembled, the elders seated. Kaelen strode onto the dais, her alpha shift instantly seizing the attention of every eye. She spoke with the weight of justice. She didn't scream or rage. She calmly unrolled the ancient text and presented the forgery. The ensuing silence was broken by the sharp, stunned gasps of the moderate pack members. Ronan, enraged, shifted, his alpha form massive and snarling. Treason. Execution. The conservative elders and Ronan's loyal guards surged forward. Just like that, the battle was joined. Zev's state. Adrenaline fulfillment. He was a blur of calculated action, his rogue blade flashing, protecting Kaelen's blind spots. He helped subdue the charging elders, pinning them with the practiced, non-lethal efficiency of his years as a rogue. He was no longer a cynical bystander, but a triumphant protector, finally acting decisively. Kaelen engaged Ronan. This was not the chaotic eruption of the Shadow Wolf. It was a duel of skill and control. Ronan fought with brute force. Kaelen, now master of her power, met him with calculated precision. She let the Shadow Wolf energy coat her standard shift, augmenting her speed and strength, but never losing control. She didn't aim to kill. Before the words left her lips, Kaelen maneuvered Ronan, using the augmented power to snap his leg with a clean, focused strike. Ronan fell, broken, defeated, the evidence of his fraud scattered across the stone floor. Conflict resolved. Zev stood over the defeated elders, breathless, watching Kaelen standing over the snarling, beaten Ronan. His failure to act in the past was finally redeemed through his action now. Chapter 23. Falling Action. After that, the fighting stopped. The pack stared at the broken alpha, at the forgery, and at Kaelen, the winged silhouette of power now receding into a composed, determined woman. She addressed the pack, holding the true right of union text. The immense, terrifying weight of their losses became the foundation of her message. "I will not be your alpha," Kaelen declared, her voice ringing clear across the stunned hall. Ronan's system failed because one person held all the power. "I will not replace one tyranny with another." She called for a council of equals, one representative from the traditional pack, one from the elders, and one from the rogues. Zev's state. Relief. Exhaustion. He moved immediately, directing his rogues to secure the defeated guards and ensuring the 3 defectors were protected. He secured the integration of his rogues, achieving his ultimate goal of safety and autonomy for his people. He had to know the full stakes of this new pact. The finality of the decision hung in the air. Zev stood beside Kaelen, his body aching, the silence between them a heavy comfort. The war was won, but the rebuilding had just begun. Chapter 24. Resolution 6 months later. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of construction and fresh pine. Zev was working on the new, secured perimeter, a meticulously planned, well-fortified settlement for the integrated rogue community, now formally recognized adjacent to Oakhaven Keep. Zev's state, peace, acceptance. He was no longer a cynical outsider. He found meaning in guiding and protecting the reformed pack. He looked up as Kaelen approached, not in her alpha shift, but wearing simple, practical clothing suitable for travel. She carried no ceremonial items, only a map and a problem. Kaelen's goal, pack balance. The northern trade route is demanding exorbitant tariffs, Kaelen stated, rolling out the map. The council is split on whether to retaliate militarily or negotiate. What is your counsel, Zev? She asked not for a command, but for his strategic advice, valuing his cynicism, his caution, and his mastery of logistics. Just like that, Zev had fully integrated his life and trauma into a useful resource. He studied the map, giving advice as an equal partner. The scars of the flogging remained, but the Shadow Wolf's power was now a subtle, controlled aura. Kaelen was the counsel, and Zev was the anchor. Epilogue scene: the scars and the wings. Later that evening, Zev found Kaelen standing on the ramparts of the keep, overlooking the thriving, integrated lands. She stood in the moonlight, contemplative. "The work never ends, does it?" she murmured. Zev stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the rough stone. He saw the subtle, permanent scars on her shoulders, marks of the day Ronan tried to break her. He saw the faint, midnight energy that occasionally flickered around her, the controlled power. "No," Zev replied, his voice soft, finally free of the deep, cold guilt he had carried for years. "But now, we build something worth defending." He looked out over the wide, open lands. His past inaction was redeemed by his present loyalty. The core emotional question was answered. Defiance, when coupled with justice, could dismantle tyranny. And he was finally, truly home.